you doing, guys? Today we're continuing some work on the new seat pan for the little Mule, but we're not working on the actual new seat pan. What I'm going to do today is start to get the parts off of this seat pan that are going to be swapped onto the new one. So for instance, the seat's got to go, the Cyclops light is going to go off of this seat pan, but we're not going to, or what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to drill a hole in the new seat pan for that light. I do have a matching light. I've had this one for a long time. They're both the same. Unfortunately, I don't have a base. So what I'm going to do also today is I'm going to make a new base for this. And I am going to try to make a base out of this block of aluminum. So it looks basically exactly the same as the original. Just I'm going to cut it and shape it with a file and then drill it so I'll have a second base for this one. And let me show you where I'm going to mount this. With the little Mule spun around in the shed, it's going to be a little easier for me to work on, plus to, make a video to show you what I'm doing. Outside of the width of the original seat pan, the other thing that was a little bit weird looking was the space between the rear tires and the seat tower, I guess you would call it. So that's what I'm going to fill with my lights. On the side of the tower, there's a factory, basically a factory locating hole for something. I don't know what it was for, but there's one there, and you can actually see the other one right there. I'm going to drill these out to 1/4 inch, and I'm going to mount my lights kind of in this position right here. Oops, sorry, in this position. And what that'll do, I believe, is it will fill the gap between the tire and the seat tower nicely, as well as not interfere with the new seat pan, nor will it be obtrusive, like it's going to be sticking out here. They're going to be underneath the seat pan between the tire, so you're really only going to see them from the back. It's like if you're looking directly at the back of the tractor like this. I think it's going to give a good look. It's going to use up both my lights that I really have no use for, so might as well put them on the tractor. A little bit of rewiring. I will have to take the rear tires off in order to get the drill in there. Not a big deal. So let's go ahead. Let's get this thing up on the jack stands. Let's get these rear tires off and ultimately start making the new base for this light. With the light dismounted from the fender pan, I can kind of show you what I'm going to do. Now, I probably could take this over to the machine shop and put it in the Rockwell milling machine and mill it, but I think we're going to do it with a hacksaw and a file. After looking at the 2 blocks of aluminum that I had, and I literally got them out of my junk boxes down at the bottom, I found these 2. This one is the right thickness this direction, and it appears to be about the right thickness height wise. So what I'm thinking about doing, this one's a little bit bigger overall. I think I'm going to save this one, put that one to the side, and I'm going to try to make this base out of this particular piece of aluminum. Ultimately, I'm going to take some measurements, the thickness of this, the width of that, the height of this, make some marks on this to see where I want to cut the basically the squares of aluminum out of the way. And then I'm going to, and then obviously I got to cut it in this direction to make the width that way. And then from there, I think I'll start to file it to shape. They'll make a nice little bevel, round the top, and then ultimately get it ready to be drilled. It does have a 5/16 hole at the bottom in order to mount it. We'll do that, and then obviously this is a 1/4 inch bolt which will run in this direction. I'll drill that up, and then we should have a base that looks very similar to this original chromed base. It'll just be, obviously we'll use it on that. So let's go ahead and take some measurements, lay it out on the block of aluminum, and then we'll start probably cutting. The first cut I'm going to make is I'm going to make the width cut, which is 1 5/8 inches. So I measured from this corner to the end of the tape. That's 1 5/8 inches. I picked the side that was not square on the block. This side is actually pretty darn square, so I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to use the hacksaw. I'm going to cut right along the tape. I'll just keep spinning this around along the tape until I get this end of the block off, and then we'll have the block to the width of the base. All right, so let's get this thing in the vise and get to cutting. With the block cut to size, I did the layout of the general shape that I want. Now, I made sure that when I was making my measurements, I used one side of the block. So in other words, I went from this side to that line, this side to that line. So that way I know this is the center line of the block, and I measured that obviously from the same side. And then when I did these lines, I measured from the base up, from the base up. So that way, theoretically, I'll have a square block, so to speak, when I cut this out. Now I'm going to run a tape line along this, make this cut to the center, make that cut to the center, and then I'll retape it and then cut this side and then retape it and cut this. So I'm basically removing the chunks with the X. And I'm just going to use the hacksaw. It's right there. Put it in the vise, cut it, and it, whoops, hopefully it'll be in a better shape than that focus, right? After some slicing and dicing, this was the first cut I made. And then I made the second cuts were these. And then the third cuts. The third cuts, what's that? I mean, the third and fourth cut was right there. So now what I'm left with is a fairly rough shape that I want. Now I'm going to come in here now with the file and start cleaning this up. Obviously got to arc the top a little bit, bevel the bottom, but essentially I've got what I need to get the more fine shaping done. So let's get this thing in the vise, let's get the filing, and then we'll get back to it. Now that I have the aluminum rough shaped to the way I want, there is one little slight difference. Is you can tell that this here is a little bit thicker this way compared to this one. And although it's, you know, when you got them side by side, visually you could tell that they're a little bit, it's a little thinner. Really in function it doesn't matter because the hole is right there. There's plenty of meat here for it to be done. Now I just got it rough filed. I just used a very coarse file to rough shape it. And it did, I think it looks pretty darn good myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it in the drill press and go ahead and drill the 1/4 inch hole here, and then the appropriate hole for a 5/16 bolt. And then I will start to finish filing and sanding it into the final shape. So we started off needing 2 of these. So we had a couple of these, and then we finished off with this. So it looks pretty good. Let me get this out of the way. It doesn't look that bad. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's going to do the part. 2 little things that are, you know, I missed, but it doesn't really matter. You can see the stem here is a little thicker than the one I made, but again, doesn't particularly matter. The second thing is, I don't know what the heck happened when I drilled and tapped the hole's off, but again, it doesn't really matter. You're never really going to know. So I lightly filed it with a finer file. I hit it with some 80 grit sandpaper. I'm probably just hit it with like 220 just to smooth it off a little bit more, but that's about it. So now that I got it made, let's go ahead and modify the lights to work on the tractor. This part I'm going to be a little bit out of the picture, but we're going to take a look at the lights that I'm going to be using on the back of the tractor. Essentially, they're just old school style lights. They are self-grounding, single wire for the power, spring-loaded, because as you know, when you have one of these old lamps, they have the light bulbs with the little posts on it that goes down, twists in, and then the spring is essentially what keeps everything in place. But with this one having a white wire and then this one originally having too short of a wire, I'm going to need to extend this. And how I typically fix these is I'll take, because the original looks like this. Let me just take this off real quick. The original kind of looks like this, which is just kind of like a weirdo connector where the light bulb post, the bottom post, just basically sits on top of that. And you need to kind of recreate that so the light will work. So I'll take one of these male ends, crimp end. I'll cut the plastic off. I'll bend it to a 90 degree, and then I'll trim it down to probably right where the little hole is. I'll just cut it off. Essentially, I've done it to this wire once before already. And as you can tell, it just gives me a nice little 90 degree plate where the bottom of the bulb, this end of the bulb, will sit very nicely and make contact. I'm going to go ahead and make two of these with longer wires, so that way I could put them in the lamps and take the lamps over to the tractor to figure out where I want the wire to go and how long I want. So I'm going to probably use about 1.5 feet of wire for each lamp, which is going to be way enough. So let me get these little things together, crimped on, and we'll get these lights laid out. I finished up wiring the lights. Essentially, this wire will be the main wire coming from the wiring harness that'll feed power to this light. I did put the switch for both of these lights in the back of this light. It's kind of like how I had it originally on the little Mule. This wire here is the power out. So power comes in, the wire splits. One goes to this light bulb, the other one comes out. Obviously, it's going to traverse the tractor into this wire. So this light is going to come on. And I did test them. They work. The switch works. So I should be all set there. Next is to drill the holes in the seat stay of the little Mule in order for me to mount or put the mounts on. Now, since the beginning of the video, the only other thing I did to the mount was I just gave it a little bit of a sanding and then just hit it with some mother's polish. And just to make it look a little bit more like the chrome of the original. So the one with the switch is going to be mounted on the original mount. The light that has just the single bulb in it will be mounted to this one here. So let's get to drilling and get these mounts put on. With the brackets bolted down, I loosely affixed the lights into place, and they look pretty even. It looks like my homemade bracket over here is going to work out just fine. Once I put the fender pan back on it, you'll probably never even know unless you watch my videos. The only other thing I need to do is I do need to drill a hole somewhere like right around here. I'm thinking for the wiring. The wires need to go through this side plate on both sides. But I'm going to put the hole for the wire like almost directly behind the actual pedestal or post. So that way these wires just kind of go right in and you won't even really see them because the light itself will block it. And I'll do the same over here with this light. And then I'll just do the final hookups to my power wire, and then we'll test them out, and hopefully everything will work as it should. All right, so let me do this last final install. There they are, all hooked up and mounted. I think they look pretty good, actually. My homemade mount is right there. It looks the part. Fit real nice. So if we go on the inside, we can see the bolt is right there. We have a small hole for the wire. Same thing for this side. The original mount is right there, and when we pull back to take a look from the total rear, they're nice and straight. They seem to be aligned, and they work. So let's go ahead and turn them on. So I got the battery hooked up, light ignition switches to AC. We go ahead, we turn the light on. My fronts are on. My tail light is on. And then the switch for these lights is kind of cumbersome. I I didn't want to put another hole. I could have used that one, but the starter solenoid's right behind it, and it's really tight. I don't think I could get the switch in there, and I didn't want to drill another hole, so I just left it the way I used to, which is I have the switch right here. Flip that up, and the rear lights are on. Now, I was going to get crazy and hook it up to the shifter, so when you go into reverse, those lights would go on, but yeah, just more work that we don't need. And we go like that. Where's that switch? Switch is off, ignition's off. Unhook the battery. And there it is. I'm not too happy with the switching of the rear lights, but I'm going to live with it. I'm not going to drill another hole, and I don't want to have an erroneous switch, another erroneous switch just sitting around. But I'm going to get it off the jack stands, and I'm going to finish up that fender pan. And hopefully we can get a tractor show or two underneath its belt this year, but who the heck knows. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your viewership. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, let's try that again. As always, have a great day.